Welcome, conversing listeners. What is the credibility of the faith in a time like this? The Rethinking Church Initiative is launching a new podcast called Credible Witness.
I'm Nikki Toyamasito, and this is Credible Witness, a collection of stories and wisdom from faithful people wrestling with and bearing witness to the credibility of Christian life today. Each episode is an invitation to listen generously and courageously to one person, navigating social tension and moral complexity, negotiating doubts, struggles, and fears, overcoming obstacles and pursuing justice, and living out the convictions of their faith. And every voice reminds us that the church is called to be a credible witness to Christ, a living reality of hope, justice, truth, and love.
It's a beautifully rendered collection of stories that reward a courageous and generous listening. So please check out our show notes for links to the Credible Witness podcast feed, as well as crediblewitness.us. I'm hoping that you'll subscribe today, and I believe you'll be deeply encouraged by the series of episodes to come. Thank you for listening courageously with me, and may God bless this new effort.
Conversing is produced and distributed in partnership with Comet Magazine and Fuller Seminary. I'm Mark Labberton. Welcome to Conversing. I'm excited today to introduce you to a new friend, Jon Guerra. Jon is a singer-songwriter who lives in Austin and writes what he calls devotional music, which he describes as less about Sunday morning worship music and more Monday morning prayer music. His thoughtfulness, his creativity, his sensitivity to language, to what's going on in real life on many fronts is one of the things that has drawn me to his work. He has composed albums. His first was called Little Songs in 2015. Another album came later called Keeper of Days in 2020, followed after that by a third album entitled Ordinary Ways in 2023. His most recent album is called American Gospel, and it's out now. In addition to writing music for devotional purposes, Jon also has composed music for films, not least Terrence Malick's 2019 film, A Hidden Life. Jon, what a great gift it is to me personally, and I know to our listeners today, to have you as a guest on Conversing.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, I have admired your music, and you reminded me that we had met, and I am so grateful. Once you said that, I immediately remembered your music, and I reattached the parts of the universe that has temporarily gotten separated so that I realized it was you. And among other things, you and I discovered when we first met that we both had a love for the poetry of George Herbert. I want to start there because, well, not everyone listening to this is necessarily a George Herbert fan, as you and I are. He was a 17th century metaphysical poet, and his poetry is really some of the most exquisite English poetry. And he's had a huge shaping influence on me and on you, and I think on your songwriting. So talk to us a little bit about George Herbert, why he is such an influence, and how you think he's influenced your songwriting.
Well, I'm just a devotee, a Herbert devotee, and his language, his attention to the inner life of prayer and of the Spirit is extremely meaningful to me. He didn't publish anything in his lifetime. Everything was published posthumously by his close friend. And that's a tremendously beautiful detail for me as well, that it was something that he didn't live to see the effects of his work, which I think is cuts against the grain of at least much of the industry I find myself in, and certainly much of maybe the lesser ambitions I have just as an artist who does this for a living. So it's like a diagnostic for me. Like, would I be willing to cultivate the kind of inner life that can produce something in secret that I never see the effects of in my lifetime? And would I be able to cultivate action in that way too? Because I think a lot of what is required of us these days is kind of a long view and not so much the immediate, feeling, good feeling of having done something effective or something. So Herbert, all that to say, Herbert is very, very inspiring to me on several levels.
Yes. I love the way you described his inner life, because I think that is the dominant theme that comes out of his poetry, and this sort of deep theological, spiritual reflection of the nature of God in relationship to time and space both. He has this kind of cosmic vision tied deeply to an incarnational vision, and that is the vision of the New Testament, and that is that's where the convergences of the kingdom of God are meant to show up. I do think that I know that you're a person who has described your work as in part being a devotional musician. And certainly it's easily possible to read George Herbert as certainly a devotional poet, if not also musician. Tell us about what being a devotional musician means.
Yeah, so that's hopefully a direct reference to George Herbert, someone for whom the craft was the manner in which, at least it seemed, the craft was the manner in which his prayer life and devotion to God manifested itself. And I think that's really what I aim for. My highest ideal is that my songwriting, my craft, would be a means of coming into contact with the invisible God and the invisible person and the Spirit. And so I've described it as less for people who are familiar with Christian music as a genre. I describe it as devotional music as less Sunday morning worship, more Monday morning prayer, music for attending to the soul, which, I came up with that several years ago, and now I cringe a little bit. It feels a little lofty, but I think the idea is still very honest, which I think any kind of beauty puts us in contact with invisible things. And that's really the point. And that's what I want my songs to be, less so something that riles people up or something that is used to facilitate corporate singing, which is great. Big fan of corporate singing in church, but something that helps people in the in the tender moments of their lives, and hopefully in their most honest moments, helps them orient themselves to higher and longer and deeper things.
Yes. Well, one of the things that we can benefit from in your case, as opposed to George Herbert's, is that we can get the sense of the rhythm of reality that you are internalizing as you live in the day that we're in, and that you then, by the musical accompaniment to your poetry, you synergize, obviously, together these two dimensions that end up making a very, very significant statement about the moment and then eternity and the moment. This is the George Herbert theme, right? Constantly back and forth, the eternal and the most immediate and present. And it's that tension that we all live in, and the questions that you raise. And I do just want to say thank you for writing music that is as much legitimate question asking and statement making as it is strengthening and cultivating. So I would say it's certainly for the soul, but it's for the sake of the world as well. And not all devotional music that's for the soul seems in any way to be connected to the wider reality. So I thank you for that very strong, distinctive contribution. Let's listen to some of your music, and then there's one song that I want to spend the majority of our time discussing. Let's start with hearing American Gospel.
Blessed are the powerful, blessed are the rich, Blessed are the merciless and the hypocrites. They will inherit the empires passing. It's the American gospel. Blessed are the superstars, blessed are the famous. Blessed are the ones who make their faces ageless. They will inherit the magazine covers of the American gospel. Come to me those who have something to give. Come to me those who are likely to win. Come to me those who are ruthless and proud of it. Oh, come pledge, come swear, come vote for the American gospel. Don't wait, come trade your soul for the American gospel.
Jon, I think that what we hear in that song is an example of what I think a number of your songs do, which is what I was referring to earlier, that you bring together, in this case, ironically and painfully and suggestively, a collision between the reality of the gospel known and revealed in Jesus and the American gospel, which has all of these completely different qualities to it. And it's an example to me of what I meant when I was saying that you position yourself in a very self-conscious way with the times that we are actually living in and the culture that you and I live in the United States. And you sing in this way that surfaces all kinds of implicit and explicit challenges. I'm just curious, how did that song arise, and what would you say about it now?
You know, it was the year before the most recent election, and there were so many voices saying so many different things. And it really was just me thinking, okay, how do I give in my own small way, in my own little corner of the world, how do I give Christ a say in this conversation? And he has such a beautiful vision of the kingdom in Matthew 5, the Beatitudes. And, you know, these are such beautiful words, but we're also a little bit inoculated to the power, because there's no way that we could go back and hear them in the context in which they were given. But we can hear the opposite, and maybe that can jostle us a little bit. And that was really the idea. Like, how far can I take this inversion? And finding that, yeah, it was very fun, but also sobering to think that, oh man, this actually fits all too well with at least a big part of American culture that we find ourselves living in. And then to sing at the end of that song, to sing then the real Beatitudes, that it felt like a much stronger contrast, and hopefully one that helped people hear those words afresh.
Yes. Well, I do think, you know, it's Christian history. It's actually Israel's history and the church's history, that there's this continuous collision between the life and portrait of what God's life for God's people is meant to be, and the way that God's people are supposed to mirror the reality and character of God, both in Israel and then again in the church. And Jesus, of course, is the only one who has ever enacted that full character before us to give us a picture of what it looks like. And certainly then, as you say, in the Beatitudes, it's all a series of inversions and unexpected surprises. I've often thought of Matthew as the gospel of surprise, because it feels as though throughout the whole of Matthew, that surprising reality keeps bursting on the scenes. But I think the tension that you've lifted up is one that appears implicitly in some of your other songs. Like, let's listen for a minute to Love Your Enemies, which is another part of Matthew 5 and comes out in a very, very provocative way.
Give to everyone who you. Be good to everybody, no matter who. Do to them as you'd have them do to you. Love your enemies. No greater love is there than this. I laid down my life, now I do it again. Gave it to you, so give it to them. Love your enemies. Love, love, love your enemies and be children of your Father in heaven. Children of your Father in heaven. Turn the other cheek, put down your fist. Give up your coat if someone asks for it. What have you got that you are not given? Give everything. And when the sun sets on your labor, turning the tides but not in your favor, love is a rescue and it'll save you. For love, love, love your enemies and be children of your Father in heaven. Children of your Father in heaven.
Jon, I think one of the things that is so profound about that song is that it focuses so explicitly on surely one of the most difficult things in all of Jesus' teaching, which is to love our enemies. And one way of describing the past decade in America is that we've moved from being a nation with people who have lots of differences to people who have lots of apparent enemies. And that shift, which is a fairly pervasive shift, I would say, in our culture, that we now think regularly about people who are supposedly our enemies, and then people who are, it seems often, truly our enemies. And the challenges of Jesus' teaching could not be more relevant to this particular moment in American history. I'm curious what things, and I can imagine many, but what were some of the things that led you to write that particular song?
I was writing for an album that came out in March of 2025 called Jesus, and it's all songs about the words and the person of Christ. And the album started as kind of a way to reacquaint myself with the person of Christ. And one of the things that you discover when you reacquaint yourself with the person of Jesus is that he was comforting, yes, but he was also very offensive. He was challenging. He was consoling, but he was challenging. And he was always turning the dial up, turning the heat up, it seemed, on what we think of as who's in the kingdom of God, or who's a good religious person. And one of my favorite books is Jesus and the Disinherited by Howard Thurman. And in that book, he says something about loving your enemies that has stuck with me. He says, when Jesus says to love your enemies, he's not counseling towards perfection. He is giving us a means of survival. He says this is not sentimentality, but this is loving your enemies is the only way to resist becoming what one hates.
Yes.
So that was such a profound truth for me to read and to realize that we are either being worked upon, or we're moving forward and moving towards the world in all its ugliness and all its violence in love, or it is doing something to us. And we all know that the world is doing something to us. The news is doing something to us. Our own adrenaline and our own anger and our own rightful disgust over much of what's happening, that isn't a passive, that's not passive in us. And so we have to do something with that. And what Christ calls us to is something that is very difficult to do in the flesh. And it's really something that I think can only be really sustained over the long haul by the Spirit. And it is something that requires death, requires a death of the ego, a death of what you think ought to happen, and really a death of inclusion. It seems inclusion in a larger group. Kierkegaard says that Christianity and religion, when it leads to social action, it can never be recruited into some program or some systematized ideology. Otherwise, it loses its central substance, its central energy. And I think loving your enemies is exactly what he means, because there's a lot of people who find that quite offensive, that Christians would want to love their enemies and not hate them and not move against them in violence.
Right. Jon, I don't know the repertoires widely, of course, as you would know, but I don't know of any other song that is as explicit and pronounced in this theme as your song. And whilst many of your songs seem to me that they have been created principally for you or some musician to present, this is a song that feels to me like it's one that could more easily be adapted into congregational worship. Have you used it that way? And could you imagine that if you haven't?
Oh, I haven't used it that way, but I certainly could imagine it. I certainly tried to make it as singable and as catchy as possible, because I thought if there's anything that's going to be an earworm, I would love these words to be an earworm.
Right. Well, with all due respect, I'd encourage you to try it. In my own experience as a pastor, one of the things that I think deeply about worship is that it is literally a practice of reordering power. And so much about the kind of things that we sing congregationally are meant to help us address the primary challenges that we have as we leave. And we do the work of worship, the liturgy, the work of the people is a work that is a work of reframing, recalibrating, reordering. And this song just strikes me as an example of what a remarkable thing it would be for a congregation to own this song as one of their songs of reorientation. I think it's a great gift. Thank you for it very, very much. One other song that I'd like to play before we move to the primary song I want to focus on is The Kingdom of Jesus. Tell us about it, and then we'll listen to it.
It's a song that was released through the Porter's Gate. And again, it was a study in contrasts. What is the kingdom of Jesus like? What is the kingdom of the world like? Jesus, the only time, as far as I know, that he directly addresses the powers that be, Rome, and not the religious leaders. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's standing before Pilate, and it's like that's really the only time he really addresses Rome. And what he says is very direct. He says, "My kingdom is not of this world." And then he really invites Pilate. Pilate says, "They say you say you're the king of the Jews. What do you say about that?" And then Jesus flips it. He says, "Well, who do you say that I am? Did you hear that from somebody, or is that what you think?" Which is such a beautiful, provocative revelation of his primary identity as the king of the universe. I mean, he's just like, no, right here, like, you tell me. And Pilate's like, wait, am I on trial here? Of course, the answer is yes, and he has been before all of us who read that story for thousands of years. And so I see that as I saw that as sort of archetypal for Jesus and his relationship to world powers, is that we often, the question often becomes, does this candidate, what is their faith background? What do the religious groups, what do they make of this person? Does this person have the X and Y vote? And I think the real question is, before God, who do you say that this figure is, that Jesus is? And he explicitly says, my kingdom is not of this world. And it's shortly thereafter they kill him, because you can't have a king living in another kingdom and be living as a threat to that dominion. And I think it's a challenge. And for me, this song became kind of a way to explore Well, the kingdom of Jesus is a seed. The kingdom of Jesus is one that is ruled by a lamb who was slain, as it says in Revelation. And the kingdom of Jesus is one that we are called to have primary allegiance to. Though we are citizens, we're citizens in a foreign land. I mean, we are, as American citizens, this is not our home. This is not, though we can love and work for the flourishing of this country and praise it when it is praiseworthy, and hopefully with gentleness, as if we were correcting a father or something, we can judge it and correct it when need be. But doing all that within the backdrop of an allegiance to a greater kingdom. And really that's what this song is trying to explore.
To what shall we compare? Kingdom of Jesus, not a seed. It's small, it's sown, it's tended and grown, and it's sturdy in you and me. Its branches never break, and its fruit never withers. His kingdom is not of this world or of any kingdom whose ruler's face is on a penny. He comes to make all things bright and put a new wine in us. He's chosen the small things to outlast the great, the meek and the merciful to shine through the hate. Though it seems some days that hell and its gates are prevailing. Oh, say, can you see the kingdom within us? It's the kingdom of Jesus. To what shall we compare? The spirit of the hour, if not a sword. It frees us, unites us, enslaves and divides us in violence. Help us, Lord. His kingdom is not of this world or of any kingdom whose ruler's face is on a penny. He comes to make all things bright, put a new wine in us. He's chosen the small things to outlast the great, the meek and the merciful to shine through the hate. Though it seems some days that hell and its gates are prevailing. Oh, say, can't you see we have one allegiance? It's to the kingdom of Jesus.
Jon, one of the texts of the New Testament that means the most to me is Romans 8, as it is meaningful to many, many people. And one of the reasons why it's so significant is because of what I've come to experience through reading that text as the way that the whole universe groans, that God groans, that God the Father groans, that God the Son groans, that God the Holy Spirit groans, that creation groans, that we as people made in God's image groan. But there is also, as you know, woven through all of Romans 8, this incredible sense of the beauty of God and the purposes of God and the faithfulness of God. And when I listen to much of your music, and I think I've listened through most of the catalog, I'm struck again and again by this sense of groaning beauty that comes through your poetry and comes through your music. And I feel it powerfully in many songs, but I have to say the one that has been most obsessively gaining my attention has been a song that you wrote about 10 years ago called Citizens. Set up this song and why you wrote it, and then we'll play the whole song in this case, and then I want to jump in to talk about it with you.
I wrote this song with my wife, 8 years ago, as we were coming to terms with inauguration 2017. And my wife is a social worker. We, for many years, lived in Chicago in a neighborhood with a bunch of refugees and immigrants. I am a son of immigrants. My dad is from Cuba. My mom is from Argentina, and I was born here. And I think it was really, this song was a way to try to process many, many different things while using the image of a sojourner and a foreigner and citizen as kind of the central imagery of our relationship to God, and putting that over and against what that image has become politically in our culture. And I think more so it was me taking my confusion to God and not taking it horizontally to wherever I think it needs to go, but it was an attempt to kind of lift my heart to the Lord. And yeah, I didn't sing it. I didn't sing it for 3 years, except for to my wife and my friends. I didn't release it for 3 years. And I think I was afraid I was involved in a church that would not and did not take kindly to this kind of expression of faith. And I was afraid, and to my shame, but I'm glad that it was my wife and my friends who were like, you need to release this for your sake and for ours and for people that you have yet to meet.
Yes.
And I think they were right about that.
Well, I'm glad that we can play the whole song, and there are links in the notes to the lyrics for the song as well, for those who want to listen to the song and watch the lyrics.
I have a heart full of questions, quieting all my suggestions. What is the meaning of Christian in this American life? I'm feeling awfully foolish, spending my life on a message. I look around and I wonder ever if I heard it right. Coming to you cause I'm confused, coming to you cause I feel used, coming to weep while I'm waiting. Tell me you won't make me go. I need to know there is justice, that it will roll in abundance, and that you're building a city where we arrive as immigrants, and you call us citizens, and you welcome us as children home. You were alone and rejected, misunderstood and detested. You gave it all, didn't hold back. You even gave up your life. How can we call ourselves Christians, saying that love is a tension between the call of the cross and between the old party line? Coming to you for the mothers who are all running for cover. There is a flood from their weeping. Tell me you won't make them go. I need to know there is justice, that it will roll in abundance, and that you're building a city where we arrive as immigrants, and you call us citizens, and you welcome us as children home. There is a man with a family, he has a wife and a baby. He broke the law just to save them, working for $3 an hour. Truly you said we were equal. Everyone's heart is deceitful. Everyone born is illegal when love is the law of the land. Coming to you for the hungry, eating the scraps of this country. Didn't you swear you would feed them? Tell me you won't make them go. I need to know there is justice, that it will roll in abundance, and that you're building a city where we arrive as immigrants, and you call us citizens, and you welcome us as children home. There is a wolf who is ranting, all of the sheep, they are clapping, promising power and protection, claiming the Christ who was killed by a common consensus. Everyone's screaming Barabbas, trading their God for a hero, forfeiting heaven for Rome. Coming to you cause I'm angry, coming to you cause I'm guilty, coming to you cause arrive as immigrants, and you call us citizens, and you welcome us as children home. Where we arrive as immigrants, and you call us citizens, and you welcome us as children home. Is there a way to love always, living in enemy hallways? Don't know my foes from my friends, and I don't know my friends anymore. Power has several prizes, handcuffs can come in all sizes. Love has a million disguises, but winning is simply not one.
Jon, when I first heard that song, I heard it like a cry from your heart, done on tiptoe with frantic and breathless passion and fear and compassion and bewilderment. All of that felt like it was just tumbling into reality. It felt almost like it was literally being unfurled, even though obviously it's a artistically created a piece of poetry and of music. But the combined impact here, this is where this theme that I was mentioning earlier about the combination of your music and your lyrics in this song in particular feels to me like it has a quality that not only doubles but quintuples the impact of the whole song. So I'd like to talk about the words, but I'd also like to talk about the music itself. I was interested in this song because it's faster and more compressed and more anxious than I would say any of your other songs that I've heard. And it tumbled forth with what I discovered in the laying out of the lyrics, 82 lines of lyrics. If you just keep the choruses in the song, it's 82 lines, all within a 4.5 minute song. That's a pretty dense thing. And not only that, but the vocabulary is pretty dense. And you don't want, certainly as a listener, you don't want to slow it down at all. But you definitely want to be able to hear all that you're actually saying, because it's said in that compression of desperation in a certain way. This is how it struck me, at least, that it felt like it was a gusher coming forth as a cry of the heart in the face of so many people and signs of pain. It echoed to me a bit of the language in a certain way, not entirely, but a bit of the language of Psalm 137, where there's this strong sense of the bewilderment of how the world is not going well, and how the evidences of that cause us, or like the book of Job, to cry out to God for a hearing, and in Job's case, to have God get into the witness box and be, questioned by Job himself about why are these things actually happening as they are, and to what end are these things happening. All of that felt very richly present to me in the song. Is that how it felt to you when you were creating it?
Definitely. Yeah, no, you nailed it. And kind of musical tidbit, the song is in 5/4, which is, that's not the most natural meter in song. And that's by design, 8 syllables in 5 beats. So trying to get a lot in, and also it's disorienting. I mean, 5/4 is kind of hard to just keep going. And so that felt right for the song, except for at the end of the chorus where we arrive as immigrants and you call us citizens and you welcome us as children home. Then that goes into 4/4 and 4 bars of 4. And so something that feels very home and collected. And we are creatures, and we can put ourselves and put our emotions and our experiences through, we can compress them down to these forms. And that's my favorite part about being a writer and being a composer, is the ability to kind of compress this emotion, this feeling, this dissonance into some kind of cohesive whole. And I really just, I mean, frankly, there were more verses, and these are the ones that I felt were the strongest, and also didn't want the song to be too long. But I'm very much a fan of kind of minimalist poetry as well. Robert Lax is one of my favorite poets, and it's simplicity. It's like 7 words per poem, and I strive for that kind of facility. But Lord knows that when we're feeling a certain way, and words start to tumble out, that's evidence of something too. And so it seemed right for the song to kind of just be a tumbling out of words, and some of them are not very, it's a little bit more raw, it's a little bit more just trying to look at something for what it is, and while also hopefully raising some points theologically, and kind of calling, like you say, like Job, calling the Almighty to account. And in so doing, frankly, finding some, if not complete resonance, at least finding some soothing of the dissonance in the telling of
the naming
turbulence.
Of it. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that is striking too is that in that lyrical layout that I was mentioning, you use the word God, or you use the word you 30 times, and it's a very strong sense of personal engagement with God. Now, I think as a listener, there's also some nice overtones that at certain moments make it unclear whether it's really God that you're talking to, or whether it's the church that you're talking to, or whether it's the politicians of our day that you're talking to. But it is fundamentally and primarily God that you're talking to. But the lyrics move in such a way that I think it could really be any of those things, and at times at least. And I think in that, it holds, in this compressed way you're describing, it holds the turbulence in a way that is exactly where I think where I can say I'm feeling, and where I think a lot of people are feeling these days. I think George Herbert would be very pleased with this song. I will say, because while it's not his quote style, it is very much his affection and his holding in tension things that really need to be held in tension. And yet, as you say, sometimes quote holding things in tension can just be an excuse for things to just be the same old, and not really actually trying to either press in harder or press in more clearly and honestly, which I think you vividly do in this song.
Yeah. I think that, I know that our experience of the world emotionally, spiritually, but certainly emotionally, especially in times of crisis, is information. It's data pointing to something. And I think it's the job. I think you can't call yourself an artist or a poet or a writer or a musician if you aren't willing to expose yourself a little bit more than the average person, which is why I love Herbert. He has lines like, Lord, let me not love thee if I love thee not, which is him saying, God, I want you, but I recognize there's lovelessness in me, and just let me not go halfway. I want to be full, which is such a beautiful way to describe so much of our life with God. But, a song like this, the temptation, I think, for me, I'll just speak for myself, the temptation for me, being somebody who has grown up in the church, loves the church in general, loves many expressions of the church, is to kind of have sort of a cool and collected, nothing affects me persona, and almost look at events and try to be above them and try to be outside them and try to see the deeper thing. And I think it's a tension of trying to live in the kingdom that is above, that is deeper, while also looking at the world for what it is, looking at the reality of what's in front of you and not denying. And I think sometimes I don't pay attention to those emotions, even though I am an artist. I mean, this is literally, I traffic in the affective, but sometimes I don't pay attention to those things because I don't want to address the implications of what those things might mean. And there are implications of seeing the world and identifying injustice, identifying pain identifying, just something grievous. It requires something of you. When you're cool and collected, it doesn't really ask anything of you. But when you realize, oh man, there's something happening in me, then that calls you towards something. And another Howard Thurman, a beautiful quote, Howard Thurman, he says that when Jesus sees injustice in the world and he sees the disinherited, he doesn't offer escape, he offers courage. And that, I think, is a beautiful both addressing of the reality of the world and addressing of the reality of our fear, but then calling us out onto the waves, And I think this is a side note, but I really feel that artists, I think we are meant to be the holy fools. I don't think we're supposed to be these cool and beautiful, attractive people. I think we're supposed to be like the Dostoevsky's holy fool that shows up and just starts calling things like they are, and not afraid, reputation be damned. And I think I'm still trying to grow into that courage, but I do see that it's kind of a high watermark of poetry and song, when it can somehow strike that balance of not being exhibitionist with its confession, where it's just kind of this diary entry, but it's naming something very particular while, calling forth all hearts, universal human experience. And I mean, if I somehow did that with this song, then thank God,
I think you do it very, very well. One of the things musically that I've appreciated very much about it, and then an effective way that I've experienced it, is that, when I think of a fugue line often in various kinds of musical literature would be a low range of fugue line that supports and holds it. What I felt was that your fugue line, the instrumentation that you used to begin and maintain throughout the whole song, virtually unchanged, is more like, it felt like two things to me. It felt like an electrical charge, and it felt also like a form of puppetry, by which I mean it felt like you were dangling from something that had set everything in motion, and it was highly interactive, and there was a lot of maneuvering that was going on, and I think that was my understanding of how you created the dust cloud that is the moment that we're living in, and this sense of being temporarily and or otherwise suspended rather than grounded, and trying to get to the ground was sort of my sense of the song musically. It felt like you were trying to get to a place where home, back to the 4/4 and the lyrics themselves, grounding us again. But in fact, it's very hard to be at home, so you pop back up in a way, and you go back into the jiggling dance of all the fury of uncertainty and compassion and pain that you're trying to name. Does that feel to you like it's descriptive of what you created musically?
Yeah. You're a very astute listener, Mark. I kind of want you to describe all of my songs. No, precisely. I mean, I'm hammering on that A flat, and then the seventh, kind of that G, which is, I mean, there's nothing in music that has more power and tension than the seventh to the eighth, da-na, which is, what the theme of Jaws, of course, to create tension. John Williams, da-na, 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 da-na. And the whole song is dun dun da 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 dun dun da da dun. And that's really what it feels like sometimes, kind of aching, yearning for some kind of resolution, for some home, while also skipping with, I mean, the experience of watching certain things that you wish you hadn't seen, certain things you wish hadn't happened. But we've all seen the videos, we've all seen it, and it's wild that we can all see it. And what that does to you as you're watching it, at least to me, it's kind of, it is this kind of piercing. And so to have that be the central motif in the song, I mean, it seems just right. And it's something that I really wanted this song to be kind of a supplication, which is, I'm taking this to God in the presence of others. And even that, wanting that to be my posture in general, but hoping that becomes, I don't think we ought to be recruited into kind of this exclusively horizontal evaluation of things. I think we need to be, what was the theologian who wrote The Crucified God? Moltmann. He has this quote. He says, all theology must be conducted with an earshot of the dying Christ.
Right.
And to me, that's kind of what I mean by one eye towards the cross. It's like all decisions about our public life and faith in public life ought to be made in the presence of the dying Christ. And of course, the crucified Christ, yes, but we are living, I think, I think the call of the cross is the important call for us right now, as difficult as that is.
That's beautifully put. In the end of the song, you close with what is a perfect and I think meant to be surprising line about winning. The line is, love has a million disguises, but winning is simply not one. Tell us about that particular line and how you see it in relationship to the rest of the song.
Well, that particular line was, when a certain candidate was running for office, there was a lot of talk about winning. We're going to be winning so much, you're going to be tired of winning. And appealing to, it's a funny thing to say, appealing to our very competitive culture who doesn't like to win, who doesn't like for their team to win. I get it. But again, that's not the call of love. The call of love is to come and die, which Simone Weil flips that on its head and says it's only because our minds are so warped by the kingdom of gravity. She says the kingdom of gravity and the kingdom of grace. Kingdom of gravity is, there's an energy in this world that is constantly pulling things towards the level of ego and coercion and power and seeing everything in relation to my appetites. The only thing immune from this, she says, is grace. Grace enters gently like light entering a room. And then she says, and it's the nature of grace to fill empty spaces. But it can only enter where there's a void to receive it. So good from Gravity and Grace. Also kind of depressing because we live on the nexus of the kingdom of gravity and the kingdom of grace. But then she ends the book with this. She says, there is one gate through the kingdom of gravity, which is where we live, and to the kingdom of grace, and that is the cross. Because on the cross, Christ transformed suffering into love, and he transformed gravity into grace. And she says that it's evidence of our warped minds that when we hear someone say, come and you're going to win, we think, that we're going to come and win if we follow that, or come and take pleasure by this, or come. And then when we hear Christ say, come and die, we think, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose everything. But really what Christ is saying is, come and live, come and find life everlasting. And so just trying to juxtapose the call of love with, the call of the kingdom of gravity, which is no call at all. It's really, it's a mirage at best.
Right. Jon, I think we're living in a time when the arts are as important as any such turbulent time could make them. And therefore the importance of artists and of beauty and of groaning beauty is exactly where we live. And it is that gravity that confuses us and the grace that can actually set us free to love, especially even to love enemies. So thank you for being someone who, as a brother in Christ, as a disciple of Jesus, attempts in your own expression, personality, and both musical and poetic forms to call us into that. I feel like I want to redouble my efforts to pray for Christian artists and to pray specifically for you, because I think your voice and your work right now in these very, very troubling times is all the more needed. Thank you so much for being with us today and conversing.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark.
Conversing is produced and distributed in partnership with Comment Magazine and Fuller Seminary. Peter Labberton is our engineer and editor. Evan Rosa is our producer. For more information about Comment Magazine, visit comment.org, where you can subscribe, read the current magazine issue, and browse their archive. Fuller Seminary is an evangelical, multi-denominational graduate institution committed to providing indispensable formational education for diverse Christian leaders everywhere. For information, visit fuller.edu. I'm your host, Mark Labberton. Thanks for listening with me.